It doesn't matter how old you actually are. When you're playing gigs like that, you grow up very fast. I started playing music when I was 12 years old, and my father is a school teacher, but also throughout the 70s and 80s played in punk bands throughout the Sydney scene. So it felt really natural for me to pick up instruments because they were lying around in my house, and it didn't feel like such a weird thing for me to start playing in bars when I was only 12. I was playing shows in Western Sydney in sometimes very, very rough pubs where they were full of drunk middle-aged dudes who were either super angry that I was a young girl up there playing folk music or really creepy. I came to Nashville for the first time when I was only 19, and it was the first time I'd been to the States at all. I remember just being so excited and astounded by the fact that everybody I met was in music. Everyone in the town that I met and made friends with and worked with all understood music, and they were in the music scenes. Ever since that first trip, it was my dream to move to Nashville, and now I have, just as I'm releasing this album. If I Want In is a song about leaving your hometown to move overseas and pursue your dreams. So it felt only right to have Max, Jung and Donnie from Gang of Youths, one of my favourite Australian bands, who now live in London, playing on this track.
We're here today recording at Abbey Road Studios in London, which is a dream come true for me. I've never been here before. I've only read about this place. We've got the guys from Gang of Youths and get to have them in on this session and playing a bunch of instruments for us. So it's a wonderful, wonderful day. I'm not going to forget in a hurry.
Obviously, Abbey Road Studio 3 is such an iconic space where so much has happened and so many great albums were recorded, but there's also specific instruments there that were there at the time when these albums were made and were actually used on these records. We're allowed to use the Mrs. Mills piano, which is the actual iconic piano that Paul McCartney played on Penny Lane and Lady Madonna, on our song. The day was so huge. It was this marathon. Everyone was just coming up with so many parts. Everybody was hyping each other up. We just got so much recorded. Every time someone had an idea, someone else would springboard off that idea and come up with something else cool, and we just recorded everything we possibly could. It was like the creative juices were just really flowing. There are a few things that have happened to me in my life that have been a struggle to get through, and I've always been scared to write about them for fear of almost taking back too many layers of skin. But I knew now was the time to do it because if I didn't do it now, I didn't know when I would.
This is the art of breaking into. This is the art of saying who knew.
I wrote The Art of Getting Through 5 years ago, and it never quite felt like the right time to put it out. I guess it was just waiting for its moment to shine. But with this album, it's found a home, and not only a home, but a place for it to be the actual core of what the whole record is about. The idea of The Art of Getting Through is a little bit about the fact that it's in the journey and not the destination. Figuring out how to kind of survive the things that happen to you in your life and become stronger for them is what it's all about, rather than getting to a particular goal at the end and saying, now I'll be happy.
Can't keep secrets from my mother, but I did them at 17. Had to lose one or the other, my weight or my sanity.
I wrote Silhouette with Sam Fay, who is one of my absolute favourite people to write with. Based in Melbourne, Australia. When I was 17, I struggled with an eating disorder. I never knew how to talk about it, let alone write about it, and nobody in my life knew that I had this problem. The lyrics just fell out so quickly, and I think my subconscious was telling me that it's time to talk about these things and not keep them hidden away. I think there's power in sharing. I met Steve Poltz when I played Port Fairy Folk Festival earlier this year, and we hit it off really well and we made plans to write together. So a few months later when I was in Nashville, he was my first call. I was still really jet lagged when I rocked up at his house, and this song, Squinters, just poured out of us.
Got a soul full of splinters, driving home with the splinters.
I mentioned the phrase squinters, referring to people who live in Western Sydney because they're always driving home looking into the sun if they work a 9-to-5 job. And the song is really about the absolute cold sweat nightmare that I will wake up in the middle of the night fearing what my life might have looked like if I'd never left my hometown.
Haven't seen the last of me yet. You haven't seen the last of
Writing The Last of Me was really emotional. It was one of the only times that in the midst of writing the song, I was actually just bawling my eyes out at the piano. I was essentially writing about a time that I felt at my lowest, and for the first time in my life, I felt like maybe I didn't want to exist anymore. And I'd never experienced that before. The song has really become a mantra to me. You will never see the last of me. I'm going to keep fighting. Some of these songs I feel like I've been chasing for a long time. A lot of them are so raw and personal that I've always wanted to write a song about that topic, but I never quite felt like I could get it out properly. And for this album, I really feel like I've just broken down all those boundaries and kind of knocked those walls down and gotten to the core of it, right to the nerve. We had an amazing day recording at East West Studios. It was the home for I Will Always Love You. Whitney Houston was recorded, New York, New York, Frank Sinatra, and I really felt connected to the music that inspired me to write songs in the first place. I wanted to be really ambitious with this album and work with the musicians who made the music that's really inspired me to write songs. We had my longtime producer Mike Bloom, Bo Costa from My Morning Jacket, Griffin Goldsmith from my favourite band Doors, Pete Thomas and Davey Farragher from Elvis Costello and the Imposters, Gus Seaford, who plays with Lana Del Rey, and Jenny Lewis. Nate Walcott from Bright Eyes did these incredible string arrangements. We reached out to Jim Keltner, who is arguably the most respected American session drummer of all time, and he said yes. He's played on some of the most iconic records of all time for people like John Lennon, George Harrison, the Traveling Wilburys, more people than I could possibly name. It was kind of unbelievable to hear him playing my songs.
That is a killer song.
If Your Heart Never Breaks is a song I wrote with Jim Lauderdale, and it felt like the perfect song to close out the record because it's kind of taking stock of everything that's happened. We didn't use a click track, so that means you just really have to feel it out with one another. You have to listen really hard to what everybody else is doing, and it created this beautiful pin drop magic silent moment in the studio. I leave the studio every day just feeling fearless with the wind in my back, feeling like I'm exactly where I need to be and where I want to be, and feeling like this album is representing me exactly as I am right now. I had so many once-in-a-lifetime moments making this record. When I think about where this music came from, what it's about, the darkest points in my whole life, some of the worst things I've battled through, I'm so proud that I turned them into fuel for making this album. It's truly the best thing I've ever done. It feels like getting to close a chapter in a way, and I hope I can pass on some of the lessons I learned, turning these scars into songs. Life isn't about starting over, it's about getting through, and that's what this album represents.